welcome back to my channel. We are back for some more Pokemon Creepypastas. So today I'm going to be reading Cubone's Revenge. It says part 1. I don't know if there's a second part. I haven't been able to find it. If I find it, then you will know. Anyways, let's get right into it. Sorry if you hear my fan in the background. It's hot as shit in my apartment, so yeah. I'm a big Pokemon fan. I always have been. Ever since reading the article in Contact Kids about the notorious Porygon episode of the anime, I was hooked on the odd, colorful little creatures whose images litter the article. And when Pokemon finally made its way to America, I was the first person I knew of who started watching the anime and playing the games. My first game was Pokemon Red. I traded a big pile of NES games at the flea market for a bright red cartridge with the Charizard on the front. No box, no manual, just the game. And when I got home, I literally played it for 19 hours straight, captivated by every new Pokemon species I saw and constantly searching each area for ones I might not have seen. It wasn't long after that when I got a brand new copy of Blue, and Yellow came the Christmas after it was released with all the others as soon as they came out. But despite my loving every Pokemon species and that the games come out, I've always been trapped in the first and second generations. I had a massive Pokemon collection, and I recently decided to sell off most of my collection and focus on filling the gaps in my Generation 1 collection. And there's one piece that I literally wanted more than any other: Pokemon Red. I still had the original cartridge, restarted several times. The top labeling is worn off of being pulled in and out of the Game Boy so many times. I had every other role-playing game in the series with the original boxes and manuals, some even unopened. So I was thrilled to find a boxed copy of Pokemon Red in a used bookstore, and it was only $10. I bought it and was so excited to finally complete my game collection. I decided when I got home to put it in my teal Game Boy Color and make sure it still worked. But as I turned the box over to open it, I noticed a little flaw to my new prize. The vintage Sugimori Cubone image on the slide still looked like it had been drawn on with a red pen or marker. The eye was red, with a red tear trickling down the skull, the base of its skull also covered with red, as though blood flowed down its body from beneath the skull. Oh well, no matter, as long as the game worked. My husband went to bed because he had to work the next morning, but I stayed up to play the game. I took the red cartridge from the box and lovingly slid it into my Game Boy Color, and then I switched the power on. I was thrilled to see the copyright information come up with a simple little star animation that had become foreign to me after playing the new game so much. I pressed start until I reached the title screen, with Red holding a Pokeball, random Pokemon scrolling by, and beginning with the version's beginner, Charmander. I listened to the lively regal title music as I watched Pokemon scroll by. A Ghastly, then a Cubone, then another Ghastly. It always seemed like certain Pokemon showed up at the title screen more often than others, and I wondered if every Pokemon except Mew would show up. I pressed start, and the game took me to a menu with only New Game and Options being my choice. Either I had an uncanny luck of finding a game that had never been played before, or the bad luck of getting one with a dried internal battery. I chose New Game after switching so fast to text in the Options menu. Professor Oak greeted me, as always, a Nidorino with a Nidorina's call representing all Pokemon. I chose the name Ruio for my character after an OC I used to play in when my friends and I would roleplay Pokemon nearly a decade ago. I named my rival Blue, since I've always had trouble figuring out original names for him, and the game went from there. I chose Charmander, partly because Ruio has been a fire type trainer, and partly because I've always liked choosing the star that corresponded to the version. Fire types for the first version, water types for the second, and grass for the special editions like Crystal and Emerald. Before taking on Blue for the first time, I tried my luck saving, and sure enough, the game saved. I was thrilled to finally have the game complete with the box of manuals, and for old time's sake, I decided to give old Missing No a visit. I've always loved Easter eggs and glitches, especially the freaky ones found in older video games, and Missing No and M were among my favorites. I turned the Game Boy off, pulled out the game, and stuck it through the back portion of the old Game Shark, which I then plugged back into the console. I looked online and used various codes that I found to get all the badges, changed my Charmander to a level 100 Charizard and teach it Fly and Surf. After unlocking all the locations on the map, I flew to Viridian Forest and talked to the old man. After he lost an unending struggle with Weedle, I flew south to Cinnabar Island and began to surf along the right-hand side. For a while, there's nothing unusual, just some Pidgey and Rattata and the occasional Tangela Raticate. It was just picking the Pokemon from the little grassy area south of Pallet Town, since I hadn't gone anywhere else where there was wild Pokemon. Then the screen flashed and the battle music began to play. The screen went black for an unusually long time, and then I figured I had found Missing Now at last. But I was surprised when a channeler scrolled onto the screen. Channeler wants to fight. Well, that was certainly odd. I hadn't run into this glitch before, and still sitting on my computer, I tried to search for it anywhere else, but there was nothing. No one seemed to have gotten this glitch before, and I started up the battle, releasing my level 100 Charizard to wait to see what Channeler had. It said that she had 6 Pokemon. The first one came out was a block of green and black glitches rather than having a regular Pokemon cry. The game instead began playing just the undertone of the final rival battle music. Normally that music didn't bother me, but just hearing what I guess would be considered the bass part of it, with only silence in between, was kind of unnerving, and it sounded like it was slowed down about half speed. The rest of Chandler's Pokemon were glitches as well, some having cries like a Rhydon or Zapdos. One even had the sing melody for its cry, but each one was easily defeated by my high-level Charizard. After I beat her last Pokemon, she reappeared on the screen like a normal trainer, but said nothing. I got my money from beating her, and then the screen went black. I was right back to where I'd been in the water of the eastern side of Cinnabar, but instead of surfing on Charizard with the genetic fish sprite, Ruio seemed to have just been walking on top of water. When I tried to go back onto the island, it kept saying the door is locked, like it does, like it does if you step up against the door of a gym, and the sprite of that man suddenly appeared on the roof of the gym. But it kept saying this no matter which way I went. I tried surfing around every side of the island and even to the little islands out in the middle of the two surrounding routes, and every time it said the same thing: the door is locked. It was all strange, but I just figured it was a combination of the name I had chose for my character and using the game shark codes. I went back to the right side of Cinnabar Island and began looking again for Missing No. I had figured if I could get into another battle, maybe when I came back, it would be cleared up. But it only got worse. My next encounter was a level 255 Gengar, fairly common among with Alakazam and Mewtwo when one searches for Missing No. My Charizard only being level 100, I tried to run, but each time it said I can't escape. Then Gengar put my Charizard to sleep, then used Dream Eater to faint it. With my only Pokemon fainted, the game said I had blacked out, but instead of ending up back at Palatown or the Pokemon Center of Cinnabar, or any Pokemon Center for that matter, I ended up on the top floor of the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town where Mr. Fuji would normally be. But Mr. Fuji and the rockets you have to beat to save him wasn't there. I was just standing where he would have been. I decided to check my Pokemon. Decided to check to see if my Charizard was sealed. When I pulled up the menu, Pokemon was not an option. I went to my Pokédex, which showed that I had seen and owned all 151 Pokemon, even though I hadn't used a code for that at all. I exited the menu and moved to exit the tower. Perhaps something would happen that would make this crazy game work right again. I figured cutting it off and then back on would fix it, but all these strange things happening piqued my curiosity, so I played on. When I reached the stairs to go down the floor below, a wild battle suddenly initiated, much as though I had stirred up a ghastly, but instead the game said Wild Kangaskhan Khan appeared. My heart froze, mid-beat as the sprite came to light. Its cry was long and drawn out, and its image, while in the shape of a large Kangaskhan Khan sprite, looked to be made up of bits and pieces of the Aerodactyl and Kabutops skeleton sprites. If this was a hack, this was well done. It really didn't look like what I imagined a Kangaskhan Khan skeleton would, and here and there the pixels were bright red, as though it still had muscle and blood clinging to the white bones. I was at least relieved when my Charizard came back into play, still at level 100, and its HP replenished. The Kangaskhan Khan was only level 25, so I had a view of the creepy sprite for just a moment before it fainted from Charizard's surf. I was about to give a sigh of relief as the sprite fell out of view, but was jostled once again when the game said Kangaskhan Khan was caught. There was no nickname option, and the game returned to the overworld with Ruio at the staircase of the Pokemon Tower's top floor. I pressed start, seeing the Pokemon options had returned, and selected it. My Charizard had disappeared, and in its place was Kangaskhan Khan. Its HP at 0 and its stats reading DCS normally. DCS. Normally when a Pokemon faints, it says FNT, it says fainted. I would assume it says fainted. Did DCS stand for deceased? I tried to check its stats, but there were none. No options but to cancel. Oh. Duh. I exited the menu and made my way once again down the stairs of the tower. All of the NPCs were missing from each floor, and not even Blue was waiting at the entrance to take me on. I left the tower and continued to the Pokemon Center, hoping that perhaps that would bring me back my Charizard, or at least get rid of the chilling DCS status of my new Kangaskhan Khan. I reached the door, but Ruio had stopped short, bumping into it as though it were a tall, if, though it were a wall. I tried to hatch a Route 8, but the same thing happened, and without my Charizard to fly me out, I was trapped there in Lavender Town. I tried to enter the Name Raider's house and the Pokemon Mart to no avail. The only other choice was the Pokemon house where Mr. Fuji lived, and for some reason I was able to go in there. Once I entered, the Cubone that had always been found had turned in my direction, a speech bubble with an exclamation point appearing over its head. I had seen that same Cubone on countless other games and even walked up and talked to it, but it had never done that. At this point, I'd figured nothing about this weird red version would surprise me, but I was wrong. I wasn't even sure why I was still playing this game. It was past 11 at night, and although I did have to go to work the next day, Although I didn't have to go to work the next day, I was growing tired. My eyes were especially taking a beating from staring at the tiny screen on the Game Boy, but I pressed on, fearful that if I tried to save and turn it off, that somehow it would magically revert to a normal version when I came back to it. The Cubone in the house ran up to me, much like a Pikachu moving around in Pokemon Yellow. Cubone misses its mother. Cubone removed its helmet. Was I reading that right? But the Marowak in the tower had always been treated like Cubone's mother. What did this glitchy Kangaskhan I had found had to do with this little Cubone? And what has Cubone ever removed its skull helmet? I checked my Pokemon again, and perhaps I could somehow select the Kangaskhan, and this would all be over. Charizard was still gone, and Kangaskhan had been replaced by the Cubone as the only Pokemon in my party. It was level 25 when I selected its stats. Its cry appeared on screen, was garbled and low-pitched, and its whole head area except for its eyes was glitched. It had a standard move, Growl, Bone Club, and Leer. I exited the menu, finding that the Cubone's Oversprite was gone, and left the Pokemon house, not even wanting to find out what the NPCs would even say about this incident. I tried Route 8 again, and to my relief, I was finally able to leave Lavender Town behind. The music had never really bothered me at all, but hearing it for the last hour, the happy walking music of the route would be a welcome comfort. I was denied, met by the only silence once I left the town, and all the NPCs were missing again. And even the bushes blocking the grassy area were gone, which was a relief since I didn't have a Pokemon that could cut. Since I seemed to be stuck with this Cubone, I figured I would try it out in battle. I went to a grassy area and moved around until a wild Pidgey appeared. The screen flashed and the animation continued, but with still no sound or music. The Cubone appeared, breaking the eerie silence with a low cry, and the head of its back sprite also glitched. I decided to try its growl, but the game said Cubone ignored orders. Strange, I still had all the badges from using Game Shark. The Pidgey gave a weak sand attack, and I tried again. Cubone used Bone Club instead. The attack dealt with a good big bit of damage as the Pidgey's HP bar decreased. I watched its sprite become more and more glitched like Cubone's. Cubone continued to refuse orders and use a different attack instead, but soon it fainted the Pidgey. Cubone hadn't taken much damage, so I kept going, taking on a Growlithe and then a Mankey, and the same thing happened. Cubone would ignore me, loaf around, or use a different attack, and each time it did damage, the opposing Pokemon sprite would glitch until it was just a pile of pixels before fainting. And Ekans was next, meeting the same end. Then nothing. No matter how much I stomped around the area, nothing attacked. After a while, I decided to return to Lavender Town to the Pokemon Center. As I made my way, I began to ponder what was going on. Each time I took on a Pokemon in the wild and beat it, it never showed up again. I felt sad to watch each Pokemon get its sprite damaged by this little orphaned Pokemon. What was happening to them? Was Cubone killing them? Why are you doing this? I asked softly, clutching tighter to the sides of my Game Boy. This may sound crazy, but I was actually relieved to hear the creepy monotonous tone of Lavender Town's theme. Anything was better at that point than silence. I tried to go back to the Pokemon Center, but was met with the same thud sound. I walked south, the Lavender Town theme giving way to silence again. It was time to experiment with a strange game. I reached an area where Snorlax is normally found and went to the left, through the guardhouse into the grassy area. This time, the victim was a Drowsy. But rather than attacking it to faint it, I tried to run from it. At first it said, "Can't escape," and then the Drowsy used hypnosis on Cubone, putting it to sleep. Again, I tried and was able to escape, but instead of jumping straight to the Drowsy attacking, the game said Cubone thrashing about, even though it was asleep. It dealt this damage to the opponent, fainting it and returning to me to the overworld. I checked Cubone's stats, and it was still asleep. I continued on, coming across a Spearow. I tried to escape again, but Cubone thrashed around and injuring the bird. It was the worst one yet, and instead of simply being glitched, half of its sprite slumped down a few pixels as though the side of its body had gone limp. No, no, I whispered, trying to escape again. Cuban awoke from its sleep, and I was able to leave. I wandered through the grass, and this was the real test. I gasped as the Spearow appeared, but not just any Spearow. The same Spearow with the same slumped side and low HP. I couldn't bear to look at this poor Spearow any longer. I've never liked Spearow, but even one didn't deserve this. Stop this! Can't you see you're hurting it? I suddenly burst out, overcome with emotions. Tears began to stream down my flushed cheeks as I shook the Game Boy back and forth. Just stop! I fell silent as a dialogue box appeared. Cubone ignored orders. Cubone used Bone Club. That finished the Spearow. I hadn't even given it a command, or at least not in the game. Once I returned to the overworld, I decided to check something. With trembling thumbs, I opened the menu and selected Pokédex. It now said I had seen and owned 143 Pokemon. The slot for Charizard was empty, so was the one with the Pidgey and Spearow. Each one that Cubone had defeated had disappeared from the Pokédex in the entire game. Strangely, Kangaskhan was also gone. It was now about 2 in the morning by the time I discovered this, but I was wide awake, shivering in the cold silence of the night. I was shaken by all this had transpired, and I just wanted to find a way out. What did Cubone and Kangaskhan have to do with each other? They were both ground types in familiar areas of Kanto, in the Kanto Pokédex. And I suppose Cubone looked a little bit like the baby that Kangaskhan usually carries in his pouch. I decided again to consult the all-knowing internet, and perhaps it had nothing to do with the Chandler glitch I had found, but maybe someone else had seen this connection. Then I saw it. Searching Google images for Cubone, I began seeing images people had made transforming the sprite for Cubone into a baby Kangaskhan. I read further, discovering there was a theory that Missino was originally the baby Kangaskhan sprite removed from the game, then replaced with the blocky massive glitches. While this may not be true, all of the connections between Kangaskhan and Cubone that I found were undeniable. The Kangaskhan had been killed, and the Cubone seemed to be seeking vengeance. I wasn't sure if that was the fact I had been up so late or the eerie silence of the game, but the idea really got the better of me. An innocent baby Kangaskhan forced to watch its mother die, waiting for weeks and months on the end for its body to decay and bones to bleach, finally arriving at the day when its mother's head would be suitable for it to remove and wear. But this Cubone had removed its helmet when I arrived with its mother in my party. There was something I needed to do to end this. It wasn't the Marowak's soul that needed to be put to rest, it was the Cubone's. I returned again to Lavender Town and entered the Pokemon Tower. Nothing. I went up each floor, meeting no NPCs or wild Pokemon. I reached the upper levels, but for some reason I couldn't go up the top floor. A dark block of pixels filled the area in front of the stairs. I tried to observe it, and all it said was the same thing it does when you look at a trash can in front of a captain of the SS Anne. Yuck! Shouldn't have looked. I could only guess that it was a puddle of blood or some putrid remains of Kangaskhan's body. It was where the Marowak usually attacks in the game. I stumbled through all that I've done in the tower, and the last thing came to mind. The only NPC I had come across since the whole incident began were the ones in the Pokemon house. I backtracked, my heart pounding as though I actually descending the Great Tower in real life. I entered the house, and the two regular NPCs were there along with a Chandler. I walked up to Chandler first and pressed A. Why have you brought it back to this place? Do you know what it did? I knew she was referring to Cubone. I spoke to her again, but just got the same message. I went to the woman in the house and talked to her. Even Mr. Fuji was unable to calm the monster's rage. It killed him. It will kill us all. Why? Why? Things were becoming increasingly fuzzy. My heart pounded in my ears, and I was afraid to even look at the clock. Time no longer mattered. All I wanted was to be out of this nightmare. At this point, it had become much more than just a game. I felt like I was the only one who knew about this murder mystery, and I was the only one who could solve it. Why would Cubone kill Mr. Fuji? And why would it join me and kill all the other Pokemon? All because its mother was dead? What did killing prove? I turned to the last NPC, a male character. You released it. You showed it which ones to kill. One by one, you let it out. And now, it's your turn to feel the pain they have felt. I'm sorry, I whispered to the console. A dialogue box appeared. It's too late. It's out, and you'll never able to get it back in. Unless... The game paused. I sat for a moment at the edge of my seat, and after a moment, I yelled, Unless what? Tell me! I finally shook the Game Boy back and forth, tormented by all this. It had stopped being a game long ago. Now it was personal. I was being blamed for what Cubone had done. No matter if it was some sick hacker's practical joke, how could I have done anything? I was just as much a victim of the psychotic Cubone's game as Mr. Fuji and all the wild Pokemon. I never even liked making Pokemon battle. I hated forcing them to fight to level up, and all I wanted was to befriend them, to befriend it. What do you want of me? I'll do it! I stopped shaking the handheld and looked at the tiny screen. It seemed like it was getting smaller and dimmer the more I played. Another dialogue box showed up. I could hardly read it from my eyes being so tired and filled with tears. It wants you. You to care about it. And it never wants to leave you. I won't. I just want to love it and care for it. I promise I won't make it battle anymore. Just please make it stop. All this fighting, this killing, it's just wrong. You don't have to do this. The Cubone reappeared in the overworld beside Ruio. It turned and seemed to stare at me through the screen. Cubone regret what it's done. I sniffled and gave a weak smile. It's okay. I'm sorry you had to go through all this. Why does it sound like me, dude? I whispered, caressing the little pixelated creature. That's when I realized why it was so hard for me to see. The low battery light was shining like an angry red eye. I had played for so long that the batteries were failing, but I hadn't saved since before all this had started. It couldn't just end because of a dead battery. I fumbled with the controls, trying to open up the menu to save. I pressed start until my thumbs throbbed, but to no avail. Another dialogue box appeared. Cubone knows you still love it. It will wait for you. Good, I whispered, thinking that by some supernatural means the memory would be saved and I could come back and visit this virtual friend I had made. The Cubone sprite moved, but it was an odd movement. It seemed as though its head moved side to side. A line of red pixels appeared below its head, and one final dialogue box popped up. Cubone killed itself. A horrible static-filled scream wagged my ears as the Game Boy died. It was Cubone's cry, but drawn out and badly garbled, and the volume was tremendous, more than I knew what a Game Boy was capable of. I was left in silence then. True silence. Unlike any I had ever experienced. It didn't seem to have mattered if I tried to save. Cubone wouldn't have let me. What transpired after this, only a vague memory. I remember feeling so whacked with guilt and so sad for Cubone and just wishing I could be in the game there with it. The next thing I remembered, I woke up in the hospital. I couldn't speak for the horrible gash in my throat. My husband said he had found me passed out over the bathtub. A santoku still grasped in my hand. My neck slit with blood splattered all over it inside of the tub. It had been a miracle that I had survived, though, through all the blood I had lost. To this day, I still have a scar across my neck and having to speak using an electrolarynx. Even if I could talk, I would never have told anyone what drove me to suicide that night. I wasn't even sure myself. Maybe I couldn't take the sudden silence after my game died. Maybe I just wanted so badly to be with Cubone and confident that I wanted to join it. In any case, I didn't want to take any chances of anything like that ever happening again. I put the copy of Pokemon Red back in its box, and I've never played a Pokemon game ever since. But I still think about that Cubone time to time, and I do still love Pokemon. That's fucked. Like, at first it sounded like me growing up with Pokemon and being like, oh, I love you so much, or, you could be my best friend and everything, and then just suddenly, oh, it killed itself. Well, fuck, now it's my turn. Like, that's really fucking creepy. I fucking love Cubone, too. Cubone is such, like, an underrated Pokemon. It's just cute as fuck. Anyways, that is the ending of this one, and I hope you all enjoyed. If you're new to my channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and hit the bell so you're notified of videos which is daily. Or every Wednesday. I love you guys, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.